Rain poured down on New York City, turning the streets into rivers of water and reflections. Johnson Grayson, CEO of one of the city's largest financial corporations, barely noticed. His mind was consumed with thoughts of his upcoming business presentation, every detail meticulously planned. Emotions rarely disrupted his relentless rhythm. But that day, something unexpected pierced his focus. Stopped at a red light, Johnson spotted a young woman on the sidewalk, huddled under the rain with a baby in her arms. Her soaked coat clung to her frail frame as she shielded the child with trembling arms. A cardboard sign in her hand read, "Please help. We need food and shelter." For a moment, Johnson was transported back to his own childhood, marked by cold nights and empty stomachs. Before he built his empire, he quickly pushed the memory aside, focusing on the green light ahead. But as the car began to move, a surge of empathy stopped him. Lowering his window, he watched the woman hesitate, her desperation evident. Heavy rain mixed with her silent tears as she clutched the baby tightly. Without thinking, Johnson gestured for her to approach. "Get in," he said firmly yet gently. The woman froze, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. But the baby's safety outweighed her doubts. Carefully, she stepped into the back seat, cradling her child. Johnson didn't fully understand what had driven him to act. But as the car moved forward, a faint glimmer of something unfamiliar stirred within him, a break in the armor of pragmatism he had built over the years. As Johnson pulled away from the curb, he turned up the car heater, noting how the young woman trembled despite her best efforts to hide it. Their eyes met briefly in the rearview mirror, and he saw the weariness etched deeply into her face. Yet beneath her exhaustion was a quiet dignity, a pride that kept her from asking for more than absolutely necessary. Intrigued, Johnson found himself making an unusual decision, one that veered away from his meticulously planned schedule. Instead of heading directly to the airport, he turned the car toward his mansion, a sprawling property that rarely echoed with human warmth. Breaking the silence, he asked softly, "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied faintly. "And this is Natasha," she added, glancing down at the baby cradled in her arms. A protective smile flickered across her face. Johnson nodded, asking no further questions. The silence that followed was oddly comforting, given the situation. For Emily, the luxury of the car and its warmth felt surreal. For Johnson, the presence of Emily stirred something he didn't want to confront, a faint echo of a past he'd worked hard to forget. Minutes later, they arrived at his mansion, a sleek, modern structure with towering glass windows and manicured gardens. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief as she gazed at the opulent house. Her grip on Natasha tightened, unsure of what to expect. Johnson exited the car and opened the back door, helping her out. Handing her a silver key, he said, "You can stay here until I get back." Emily stared at him, her hands trembling as she took the key. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "No need to thank me," Johnson replied, avoiding her gaze. "Just take care of her and yourself. I'll be back tomorrow." Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked back to his car. His flight and an important business meeting loomed, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at him as he drove away. Emily wasn't just another homeless person he had helped. She touched something within him that he couldn't ignore. Emily stood silently in the mansion's entryway, still in shock. The warmth of the house enveloped her, a stark contrast to the cold rain she had endured. Holding Natasha close, she took in the grand surroundings, overwhelmed by the surreal kindness of a stranger. Emily stepped cautiously into the spacious living room, her worn shoes silent on the polished wooden floor. The opulence of the space took her breath away. Sophisticated furniture, intricate art pieces, and a dazzling crystal chandelier that cast shimmering reflections across the room. To Emily, it all felt unreal, like stepping into a dream. This house, with its warmth and grandeur, was an unexpected miracle, a sanctuary that offered her a fleeting reprieve from the endless struggles of her life. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she could rest, even if it was only for one night. She wandered through the house, her steps tentative but curious. Eventually, she found a cozy bedroom where she carefully laid Natasha on the soft, plush bed. The baby's eyes lit up at the sight of the room, its gentle lighting and pastel colors, creating a soothing ambience. Emily couldn't suppress a smile as she watched Natasha's delight. For a few precious moments, she felt a joy she hadn't known in years, a happiness born from seeing her daughter safe and content. As the storm raged outside, Emily shut the bedroom door, leaving behind years of torment and uncertainty. The weight on her shoulders felt lighter, as though she had left her burdens beyond the pristine walls of this mansion. She sat quietly for a moment, letting the reality of her surroundings sink in. The tall windows framed the dark, rain-drenched garden, illuminated by soft outdoor lights. It was surreal, a haven unlike anything she'd ever known. Natasha drifted into a peaceful sleep, her tiny body nestled securely in Emily's arms. Emily held her close, marveling at how safe her daughter seemed for the first time in what felt like forever. This chance, as improbable as it was, felt like a miracle, a fleeting gift for someone like her, who had lived so long without a home or stability. Her gaze wandered to the open kitchen, a space gleaming with state-of-the-art appliances. Hunger gnawed at her, a familiar ache she had learned to suppress. But the thought of a proper meal was too tempting to ignore. Gently placing Natasha on the sofa, making sure she was deeply asleep, Emily tiptoed to the kitchen. She hesitated, almost afraid to disturb the immaculate order of the cabinets and shelves. But hunger overcame her reservations. Opening the cabinets, she discovered an array of food she hadn't seen in years. Her fingers trembled as she reached for fresh vegetables, eggs, and a small loaf of homemade bread. She felt a pang of guilt, as though she were taking something she didn't deserve, but the thought of nourishing Natasha outweighed her hesitance. Emily worked quietly, careful not to wake Natasha or disturb the house's stillness. She chopped the vegetables, her hands steady despite her exhaustion, and whisked the eggs. The scent of the cooking filled the kitchen, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of control, a small piece of normalcy she had long been denied. When the meal was ready, Emily sat at the table, her heart warm with gratitude. She gently woke Natasha, lifting her with tender hands and placing her on her lap. The baby's eyes sparkled with delight as the aroma of the food reached her. Emily cut small pieces for her, laughing softly as Natasha eagerly accepted each bite. To many, this scene would seem ordinary, a mother feeding her child. But for Emily, it was extraordinary. Each bite symbolized stability, hope, and love. She savored the moment, allowing herself to relax for the first time in months. As they finished a simple yet nourishing meal, Emily felt a strength returning to her body and soul. This house, this meal, this moment, they were fleeting, but they were hers. For one night, amidst the storm outside, Emily and Natasha had found peace. After dinner, Emily turned to Natasha, who was playing with a spoon as if it were the most precious toy in the world. Watching her daughter with a serene gaze, Emily savored the rare moment of peace. Determined to provide Natasha with some comfort, she wandered through the house, searching for a place to give her a warm bath and perhaps enjoy one herself. She entered the master bathroom and stopped, astonished by its grandeur. White marble walls, heated floors, and a bathtub large enough for two gleamed under the soft lights. It was a world she'd never imagined for herself, a symbol of luxury far removed from her reality. Yet here she was, and for Natasha's sake, she decided to embrace it, at least for one night. Emily filled the tub with warm water, its steam curling gently into the air. Carefully, she undressed Natasha, lowering her into the soothing water. Natasha's face lit up with surprise, her delighted laughter echoing through the bathroom as she splashed and played. Emily smiled, the sound filling her heart with warmth. She washed Natasha gently, her small hands and face, and then wrapped her in a soft, fluffy robe she'd found in a closet. After settling Natasha on the bed, Emily turned to the bath herself. As the warm water cascaded over her skin, it felt as if it were washing away not just the dirt and grime, but the weight of her struggles. She closed her eyes, transported momentarily to a time when life had been brighter and full of promise. Stepping out of the bath, Emily wrapped herself in a plush robe, feeling comforted in a way she hadn't in years. Natasha was already drifting off to sleep on the king-size bed, her tiny body resting against the soft pillows. Emily lay beside her daughter, holding her close. The gentle scent of clean sheets and the warmth of the room created a protective cocoon, shielding them from the storm outside. As exhaustion overtook her, Emily allowed herself to let go of her fears. For the first time in years, she fell asleep without worry. That night, her dreams were filled with hope rather than the shadows of her struggles. She saw visions of a life where Natasha could grow up without hardship, where they could both thrive. When the first rays of sunlight filtered into the room, Emily woke slowly. The quiet hum of the house and Natasha's peaceful breathing reminded her of the sanctuary they had found, even if only for a fleeting moment. Smiling, she embraced the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, better days were still possible. Emily woke slowly. The warmth of the soft bed and the sight of Natasha's peaceful face beside her briefly comforting. The serene surroundings, the elegant room, the gentle sunlight filtering in, felt like a dream. But as her gaze wandered across the luxurious decor, reality began to creep back in, dragging painful memories with it. Her past returned like a storm, turbulent and relentless. Years ago, Emily had never imagined she could end up homeless. She had been a young woman brimming with dreams and determination. A hard-working student, she'd overcome countless challenges to secure a spot at one of New York's top medical schools, becoming the pride of her family and the first to attend college. Her professors praised her talent and unwavering dedication, while her mother often recalled how, even as a child, Emily had cared for injured animals, always showing compassion and a drive to help others. Her future seemed bright, almost tangible. But everything changed the night she received a phone call that shattered her world. Her parents had died in a tragic accident. That single moment erased the life she knew, leaving her devastated. She lost not only her family, but also the emotional foundation that had kept her grounded. Grief consumed her, turning into a heavy burden that clouded her once vivid dreams. The financial support her parents had provided also disappeared, leaving her drowning in mounting bills. Emily tried to balance the demands of medical school with a part-time job, but the sleepless nights and unrelenting pressure began to wear her down. As her energy dwindled, her academic performance suffered, and she found herself losing ground. During this vulnerable period, Nelson entered her life. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to understand her pain. He became her anchor during the darkest days, offering comfort and the illusion of a safe haven. Emily opened her heart to him, trusting him completely and sharing her deepest fears and hopes. But Nelson's kindness was a mask. Over time, his true nature emerged. The man who had seemed so loving became controlling and manipulative. His affectionate gestures gave way to cruel words and demands. Emily began to feel trapped in a relationship that had once been her refuge. Quietly, Nelson began draining her emergency savings. At first, the amounts were small, barely noticeable amidst her financial struggles. But by the time Emily discovered his betrayal, it was too late. All her savings were gone. One evening, Emily confronted him, desperate to understand why he had done this to her. Nelson's response was cold and cutting. He laughed at her vulnerability, dismissing the love and trust she had given him. He admitted he had only been after her money, relishing in her dependence on him. Then, as though she meant nothing, he walked away without remorse, leaving her alone and broken. That night marked the beginning of Emily's descent into hardship. Stripped of her dreams, support, and savings, She was forced to navigate an unforgiving world on her own. But even in her darkest moments, she held on to the hope of giving Natasha a better life, refusing to let despair win. Emily found herself alone, penniless, and carrying a child she hadn't planned for. With no financial or emotional support, pregnancy forced her to abandon her studies. Desperate to rebuild her life, she sought work, but every attempt was met with contempt and rejection. The vibrant city of New York, once a symbol of her dreams, had turned into a daily battleground for survival. Each day was a fight, each night colder than the last. Yet, Emily persevered, drawing strength from her unborn child. Natasha became her only treasure, the light that kept her moving forward. For her daughter, Emily endured sleepless nights on the streets, constant fear and exhaustion. Despite the tears she cried in private, Emily never let despair show when she looked at Natasha. She smiled, masking her pain with a silent vow. Natasha would never carry the weight of her suffering. Now, within the safety of Johnson's mansion, surrounded by warmth and comfort, Emily felt an overwhelming gratitude. Memories of her struggles only magnified the generosity of his gesture. Johnson didn't know her story, yet he offered her hope, a brief reprieve from a life of hardship. How could she ever thank him? It wasn't just a physical shelter. It was a chance to rest, to breathe, to feel human again. As Emily reflected on her past, her college days, her parents' love, and all she had lost, she made a decision. She wouldn't let Johnson's kindness fade into the void. Holding Natasha close, Emily vowed to start anew. She would turn this moment of peace into fuel for her future. Johnson's kindness had reminded her that good still existed, and she promised herself she would honor it by fighting for a better life. Johnson returned to the mansion earlier than expected. His meeting had been postponed at the last minute, giving him unexpected time at home. As he entered, he sensed a warmth in the air that was unfamiliar, almost tangible. He paused in the hallway, catching the faint sound of laughter. It was soft, joyful, and unmistakably a baby's laughter. Curious, he followed the sound down the guest room corridor. The slightly open door revealed a scene that stopped him in his tracks. Bathed in the golden afternoon light, the room exuded a peaceful, inviting atmosphere. Emily was kneeling on the plush rug, playing with Natasha. She held a stuffed bear, making it dance playfully from side to side. Natasha, full of delight, reached for the bear, giggling each time Emily teasingly moved it just out of reach. Johnson stood silently, watching them. Emily's face was radiant with genuine affection and joy, a rare and beautiful expression he couldn't remember seeing in his own life. The simple happiness shared between mother and child filled the room, transforming it into a haven of warmth and love. For a moment, Johnson was captivated. A gentle smile formed on his face, surprising even himself. He realized something was missing in his life. His grand mansion, with its opulent decor and polished surfaces, had always been immaculate yet lifeless. But now, the sound of laughter and the sight of Emily and Natasha seemed to breathe life into the space, filling it with an unfamiliar coziness. Emily, sensing his presence, turned abruptly. Her expression shifted to one of surprise and embarrassment. She quickly put the bear down, lifting Natasha into her arms as though bracing for reproach. "There's no need to stop on my account," Johnson said softly, his tone kind and encouraging. Emily's shoulders relaxed, though her eyes still held a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "I didn't know you'd be back so soon," she murmured, her voice tinged with nervousness, yet steady with dignity. Johnson stepped closer, his eyes drawn to Natasha, who stared back at him with wide, innocent curiosity. The child reached out her small hand, and on impulse, Johnson extended his finger. Natasha grasped it with surprising enthusiasm, her tiny touch both soft and firm. "She's amazing," Johnson said, almost in a whisper, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "Yes, she is," Emily replied, her pride and emotion shining through. Holding Natasha closer, she added, her voice quiet, "I don't know how to thank you. having a safe night, a roof over our heads after so long. It feels like a dream." Johnson felt the weight of her words. He hadn't fully realized how much his simple gesture of offering shelter had meant. "Emily," he said, his voice sincere, "there's no need to thank me. Actually, I think I needed this as much as you do." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. To hear such vulnerability from someone so powerful was unexpected. Yet in that moment, Johnson seemed more human, even fragile. "Even so, I'm grateful," Emily murmured, her voice filled with emotion. "This place, this chance, it means more than I can ever express." As she held Natasha close, both of them felt something shift. A silent understanding between two lonely souls who had unknowingly brought warmth into each other's lives. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of relief when Johnson offered her and Natasha a safe place to stay. The weight of endless cold nights and hardships seemed to lift, replaced by a renewed strength. Watching her cradle Natasha with such love and resilience, Johnson was struck by her quiet determination and Emily. Leaning down, he gently touched Natasha's face, her laughter igniting a warmth in his heart he hadn't expected. As Johnson walked away, Emily felt a deep peace, his generosity offering not just shelter but silent acceptance. In that moment, an unspoken connection formed, powerful and unforgettable. Brenda Sinclair arrived unannounced at Johnson's mansion, her heels clicking sharply against the polished stone steps as her driver sped away. Her determined stride and piercing gaze left no doubt of her intentions. She had always carried herself with unshakable confidence, an air of superiority that stemmed from her position as the heir to an empire rivaling Johnson's. Their relationship had always been a tumultuous blend of competition and intense passion. Today, however, Brenda was here with more than casual ambition. She wanted answers. The mansion's imposing entrance opened to its familiar luxury, but Brenda barely took notice. She moved with purpose through the grand living room, her designer coat billowing behind her as she headed to Johnson's study. There he sat, engrossed in a stack of documents. He looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and faint discomfort. "Brenda," Johnson greeted, his tone polite but reserved. With a confident smile, she replied, "I missed you, Johnson. So, I thought I'd drop by unannounced." Her eyes searched his face, hoping for a flicker of delight or longing, but instead, his gaze flickered toward the hallway, distracted. Brenda noticed this subtle shift instantly. She prided herself on knowing Johnson better than anyone. Something was different, off. Their conversation began, but her curiosity simmered beneath the surface. Then, faintly, she heard the sound of laughter, soft, childlike, from upstairs. Her brows furrowed. Who could that be? Interrupting mid-sentence, Brenda rose and marched toward the noise. Johnson hesitated, briefly considering stopping her, but something held him back. Perhaps he no longer felt the need to conceal Emily and Natasha's presence. Turning the corner, Brenda froze. There, in a cozy room bathed in afternoon light, stood Emily, holding Natasha in her arms. The sight hit Brenda like a cold gust of wind. Her eyes darted from Emily's simple attire to the child's innocent gaze. A wave of jealousy and disdain surged within her. "And who might you be?" Brenda's voice dripped with venom as she plastered on a mocking smile. Emily, though caught off guard, responded with calm politeness. "I'm Emily, and this is my daughter, Natasha." Brenda's lip curled into a barely concealed sneer. Her sharp eyes assessed Emily, noting every detail with silent judgment. She stifled a sarcastic laugh, her mind racing with bitter thoughts. How could Johnson, a man of wealth, power, and discretion, allow such a woman into his home? The jealousy bubbling within her chest now threatened to consume her. Without another word, Brenda turned on her heel and stormed back to the study. When she entered, her expression was sharp, her eyes blazing with accusation. "The young lady upstairs," she began, her voice laced with irony. "Is she your latest guest?" Johnson met her gaze, his composure unwavering. "Emily and her daughter are going through tough times. I offered to help," he replied evenly. Brenda's eyes narrowed. The calmness in his voice only fueled her anger. "Don't you think it's risky, Johnson?" she said, her tone biting. "Letting someone you barely know stay here? She could be taking advantage of your kindness." Her words hung in the air, heavy with jealousy and suspicion. Johnson stood frozen for a moment, his mind heavy with the doubt Brenda had planted. He knew Emily was honest, but the weight of her words and his own insecurities made him question himself. Security and appearances had always been paramount to him, and Brenda's sharp insinuations made him wonder if he was being too impulsive in trusting Emily. Seeing the doubt in Johnson's eyes, Brenda pressed further. "Look at her, Johnson. A stranger with a child, easy to manipulate for her own gain. How do you know she's trustworthy?" Her words lingered in his mind as he reluctantly walked upstairs to the room where Emily and Natasha were. As soon as he entered, Emily felt the change in his demeanor. His tense expression sent a chill down her spine, and her heart began to race. She feared he was doubting her. "Emily," Johnson began, his voice serious, "I need to understand more about your story. Is there something you need to tell me?" Emily was caught off guard, feeling cornered by his questioning tone. It felt like judgment, and the accusation stung deeply. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her courage to respond. "I've already told you what's important," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to take advantage of anything." Johnson observed her reaction, still reluctant to believe she could be dishonest, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Emily saw the uncertainty in his eyes and felt a sharp pain in her chest. For the first time, she realized that the refuge she thought she had found might not last. "I think I understand," she said, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Thank you for your help, Johnson, but Natasha and I have stayed long enough." Without another word, she left, holding Natasha in her arms, refusing to look back. Thanks for watching till the end. Do you think Johnson is right for letting Brenda convince him? And what do you think the fate of Emily and her daughters on the street homeless again? Hit the subscription button, like the video, and turn on the notification for the next chapter.